I never imagined that one warm summer night could completely change the way I saw the two men in my life. I never thought that temptation could slip into my world so quietly, turning everything I believed about myself upside down. If someone had told me a year earlier that I'd find myself caught between reason and emotion, I would have laughed and brushed it off. But life has a strange way of surprising you. Sometimes what feels like a simple story becomes the turning point of your life. Sometimes the heart leads you to places your mind swears you'll never go. My name is Emily. That summer, I was 25. I was young enough to still be learning who I was, but old enough to think I had things figured out. I believed I could manage my feelings, that I was steady and mature at least. That's what I kept telling myself. I had been married for 3 years to a kind and responsible man named Daniel. He came from a large, warm family that welcomed me completely. One thing I loved about them was how deeply connected they all were. Daniel's younger brothers, Ryan and Mark, were always around, especially during their college breaks. Ryan was 24, just a year younger than me. He was confident, charming, and always seemed to know what to say. He had that easy kind of presence. People were naturally drawn to him. Mark, the youngest at 20, was quiet and thoughtful. He didn't talk much, but he noticed everything. When he did speak, his words carried weight. That year, Daniel had to travel for a long work project overseas. Kate, we would be gone for almost 3 months. I remember the day he left. I hugged him tightly at the airport, promising to call every day. He smiled and told me not to worry. His brothers would stop by often, so I wouldn't feel lonely. And they did. Ryan and Mark started spending more time at the house cooking dinner with me, helping with small chores, or just keeping me company in the evenings. At first, it felt simple, even comforting. We were family. We laughed, watched movies, and stayed up late sharing funny stories. Those early days were easy. The house felt full again, alive with conversation and laughter. I didn't realize it then, but that was when the air around us began to shift, slowly, quietly, in ways I couldn't name. It began with little things. Ryan's compliments became slightly more personal. His smile lingered when our eyes met. Mark's looks were different too, quieter, but more meaningful. He didn't speak much, but sometimes I'd catch him watching me with an expression that made my chest tighten. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I was imagining things that I just missed Daniel. Maybe the attention from his brothers was comforting because it distracted me from the emptiness in the house. That's what I believed at first. But denial doesn't last forever. One night, after a long, quiet day, Ryan walked into the living room with a mischievous grin. "Let's play a game," he said. I laughed. "What kind of game?" "Truth or dare," he replied. I rolled my eyes. "We're too old for that." "Come on," he said. "It'll be fun." Mark smiled faintly. "I'm in if you are," he said softly. I hesitated, but finally agreed. At first it was harmless, funny questions, silly dares, lighthearted laughter that echoed through the room. But as the night went on, the questions grew more personal. Ryan dared me to sit next to Mark instead of across the couch. I laughed, but I did it. When I sat beside him, I could feel the warmth radiating from his arm. It was subtle, but it made my heart beat faster. Then it was Mark's turn. "Truth or dare?" Ryan asked him. "Truth," Mark answered. Ryan leaned back with a grin. "Who was your first crush?" Mark hesitated for a moment. His eyes flickered toward me just for a second before he looked away. My stomach tightened. He mumbled something about a girl from college, but we all knew that wasn't the full truth. The room went quiet. Something unspoken filled the space between us. Every laugh after that felt forced. Then Ryan turned to me again. "Emily," he said with that teasing tone, "truth or dare?" I hesitated. "Dare," I whispered. "I dare you to let Mark put his arm around you until the game ends." The air changed immediately. Mark froze, his eyes wide. I felt my pulse quicken. Slowly, almost nervously, he placed his arm around my shoulders. It was supposed to be funny, a silly dare. But the moment his touch settled, something shifted inside me. It was warm, familiar, Dangerous. We all laughed to hide the tension, pretending it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. The room felt different. When the game finally ended, Ryan got up to grab drinks, leaving me and Mark sitting close. His arm was still around me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, "This doesn't feel like just a game anymore." I looked at him. His voice was quiet, but his eyes said everything. "I know," I said softly. Those two words seemed to hang in the air. Ryan came back, smiling. "You to look comfortable," he teased. I tried to laugh, but it came out weak. The truth was already visible in the way Mark looked away, in the way I couldn't meet Ryan's eyes. The rest of the night passed in awkward silence. I went to bed late, lying awake and staring at the ceiling. My mind kept replaying every detail. The warmth of Mark's arm, the look in his eyes, the sound of Ryan's voice. The next morning felt strange. The house was quiet, too quiet. We all pretended that nothing had happened, but we knew something had changed. Ryan tried to act normal, cheerful, teasing, but there was a knowing glint in his eyes. Mark barely spoke at all. I spent most of that day outside in the garden trying to think clearly. The air was heavy, thick with summer heat. I could hear the sound of laughter from the neighbor's yard, simple, carefree. I wished I could feel that way again. That evening, Mark offered to help me water the plants. For a while, we didn't speak. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable, but it was full of meaning. When I looked up, he was already watching me. "Emily," he said quietly, "I'm sorry about last night. I didn't mean for things to feel strange." I shook my head. "It's not your fault." He hesitated, as if trying to find the right words. "It just happened." We both stood there for a long moment. I could hear the sound of crickets, the distant hum of cars. The world felt suspended. That night I couldn't sleep again. My heart was restless, torn between guilt and confusion. I missed my husband. I loved him. But there was something about that summer, the closeness, the quiet companionship, that awakened something inside me I didn't want to face. Ryan was different too. I started to notice his tone change, softer, more thoughtful. There were moments when I caught him looking at me in a way that made my chest tighten all over again. One afternoon while I was folding laundry, Ryan walked in. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "I'm fine," I replied. He studied me for a moment. "You don't look fine." I looked down at the clothes in my hands. "It's just complicated." He smiled faintly. "Life usually is." There was a pause. One of those heavy silences where 1,000 words seemed trapped between two people. Then he said almost gently, "You know, you don't have to keep everything bottled up. You can talk to me." His kindness should have comforted me, but instead it made me more aware of the thin line we were walking. The next few weeks blurred together. Days were filled with routine, cooking, cleaning, pretending everything was normal. But nights carried a strange energy. There were quiet glances, lingering touches, and too many unspoken thoughts. Sometimes Ryan would tell stories from his college days, and we'd laugh together until late. Other times, Mark and I would sit on the porch, watching the stars in silence. He would tell me about his dreams, his fears, and his plans for the future. Those conversations were simple but meaningful. Maybe that's what made everything so complicated. The honesty, the comfort, the connection. By my doggest, Daniel's return was only a few weeks away. I should have been happy counting down the days, but instead I felt anxious. I had spent the summer surrounded by emotions I didn't expect. Confusion, affection, guilt, longing. It wasn't just about attraction. It was about feeling seen, understood, and connected in ways I hadn't felt in a long time. The night before Ryan and Mark were supposed to leave, we sat together in the living room. The air felt heavy, full of things left unsaid. Ryan broke the silence first. "This summer was something else," he said with a quiet smile. I nodded. "Yeah, it really was." Mark didn't say anything for a while. Then, softly, he said, "Emily, I don't want things to be weird when Daniel comes back. They won't be, I said quickly, though I wasn't sure I believed it. He gave a small, sad smile. You're kind, Emily. You make people feel seen. That's a rare thing. I felt my throat tighten. I didn't know how to respond, so I just whispered, "Thank you." The next morning, they packed up their things and left. I stood at the door watching their car disappear down the road. The house felt quiet again, but this time it wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. When Daniel finally came home a few weeks later, I smiled, hugged him, and told him how much I missed him. And I did, but deep down, something inside me had changed. That summer taught me that emotions aren't always simple. It taught me that love can be steady, loyal, and real, but the heart still has a mind of its own. Sometimes the connections we make aren't about romance or desire. Sometimes they're about feeling understood in a moment of loneliness. Sometimes they remind us of the parts of ourselves we forget. I'll never forget that summer. Not because of what happened, but because of what it revealed about me, about how fragile, complicated, and human the heart really is. It wasn't a story about betrayal. It was a story about being human, about the mistakes we make, emotions we can't control, and the lessons we carry forward. And though time has passed, I still think about those nights sometimes, the laughter, the quiet tension, the warmth of connection that changed the way I understood myself. Because sometimes the people you least expect leave the deepest mark on your life. And sometimes the heart takes you to places your mind would never dare to go.